Okay, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It is Mr. McCarrick, and obviously I am not here in class. I'm going to go ahead and zoom myself here just a little bit so I can steal just a little bit of the center of the attention. We are first, let's talk about exactly what we're going to take care of today. First of all, there is no warm up today, as we are going to be doing this activity. Is going to count as your attendance. Let's talk about some future events, and let's talk first of all about the quiz that you are scheduled to take next Monday. The quiz that you are going to take next Monday is going to be postponed. It's going to be postponed. We are not going to take your Europe in 1914 quiz next Monday. Part of that is that I was looking at the testing calendar and see that many of you guys are viciously about to get attacked by many of your teachers as far as taking a quiz next Monday or a test next Monday. I don't want to do that. I don't want to put that burden on you. But your test, which is going to be on the Spanish-American War, is going to be coming next Wednesday, a week from this coming Wednesday. And we are going to get this unit wrapped up and make sure that it's well studied up before we go into this last test. That also means, let's talk about exactly where we sit right now, is that we have a 4-day week this week. I'm going to lighten up homework a little bit so that those folks that do need to catch up NTIs need to get NTIs caught up. This is, because it's an Edpuzzle format, you guys are going to see a question that's going to come up right here in just a moment. That's going to ask you to verify exactly what I'm explaining to you right now and count it as a grade. So hopefully you're paying attention. For next week, we have a day 1 on Monday, day 2 on Tuesday. A lot of tests going on Monday and Tuesday next week. Wednesday, you guys are going to take your tests from me. And then Thursday, Friday are going to be basically catch-up days. And so I'm going to see you guys on Thursday, Friday next week, but it's going to be primarily a catch-up day to be able to catch up some work. I'm speaking directly to a handful, and sadly a little larger than a handful of students that are struggling right now getting work turned in. NTIs must be completed, and they must be completed by a week from Friday, which is going to be, I believe, if I can pull up my calendar down here at the bottom of my screen, is going to be Friday, January 29th, and that's going to be by 3:30 p.m. So that's what I need you guys to do. So as I end up basically letting this loose, I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to the lesson that I have scheduled for today. I will be back, obviously, on Thursday. I'm at leadership with the county and unfortunately not available. So please complete this. This is going to count as not only your warm-up grade, this is also going to count as a classwork grade as well. So please make sure that this is taken care of as you guys are rolling through this today. We have inauguration that's coming up tomorrow for you guys, and on Wednesday. And it is a moment in where a president has the opportunity to be able to share their vision with what they see coming for the next 4 years. And we are going to stop just for a moment, and we are going to focus on some historic inaugural speeches that have taken place before, obviously, Joe Biden's on Wednesday.
Let me assert my firm belief that the only thing we have to fear is fear itself, nameless, unreasoning, unjustified terror, which paralyzes needed effort to convert retreat into advance.
I think what's important to understand about Franklin Delano Roosevelt is very similar to what we're going to probably see on Wednesday is that we have a country that is hurting right now. Much like in 1933, when Franklin Delano Roosevelt took office in the middle of the Great Depression, as you can see here, 2 out of every 5 people were unemployed during the time. everything was very, very scary. And Franklin Delano Roosevelt's speech actually speaks to that idea, and that is that the only thing we really have to fear is fear itself. And again, what's really kind of cool about that particular statement is that it's an awful lot like being a 12-year-old that's at home on a Friday night while mom and dad went out on date night, and you hear those noises in the house, the ice maker that you normally don't hear, something else that's making noise. And really, there's nothing to fear other than the fact that you are scared. And that's the problem. And that's what President Roosevelt was trying to explain back in 1933. Now we have John F. Kennedy in January of 1961 giving his
In the long history of the world, only a few generations have been granted the role of defending freedom in its hour of maximum danger. I do not shrink from this responsibility. I welcome it. And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country.
Really powerful speech back in 1961. The United States was basically in this fight for which was the better direction to go. Was it to democracy and being led by the United States, or through the Soviet Union and communism? So one of the things that President Kennedy was trying to do in 1961 was trying to show that we as Americans, our ability to be giving, our ability to show community, our ability to be something more than just the idea that we're all fighting for the almighty dollars, is that was the spirit and character of the United States. And that's what he's trying to tap into back in 1961, that we are a better people back in 1961.
So as we begin, let us take inventory. We are a nation that has a government, not the other way around.
So what we see here also is we see that Roosevelt in 1933 was talking about building up our government being able to take care of us. And what we see in 1981 is that we see that it isn't necessarily the government that should be taking care of us, it should be ourselves. And that is also going to be mirrored not only by President Reagan back in 1981, but also another 8 years later and 12 years later under a Democratic president, Bill Clinton.
In this present crisis, government is not the solution to our problem. Government is the problem.
I, William Jefferson Clinton.
16 years later, not 12.
Today we can declare government is not the problem, and government is not the solution. We, the American people, we are the solution.
Are you prepared to take the oath, Senator?
I am. At these moments, America has carried on not simply because of the skill or vision of those in high office, but because we, the people, have remained faithful to the ideals of our forebears and true to our founding documents.
I think what's important, especially for us, as we pay attention to Wednesday, if we have an opportunity to be able to either see it live on Wednesday or to be able to catch a recording of it later, is that this is the first chance for the President of the United States to be able to deliver basically what they call, he's the chief delegator. He's going to speak basically not only to the American people, but also to Congress, talk about the things that they want to pass, the things that they want to do, the direction that they see the country going. And this can be an opportunity to be able to kind of deliver a direction that which obviously President Biden believes the country may need to go. So it'll be interesting to see exactly what he says. And I do want to spend some time on Thursday actually talking about it. So you get a chance to be able to do that. That's going to make our conversation that much more interesting. So as we go into our lesson today, we're going to hop into, first of all, let's watch this cute little summary of the Spanish-American War.
Anything to report?
Nope, all is calm. Wait, there. Is that an explosive mine?
Oh, that? That's a banana rat.
Ugh, that thing's the size of a Doberman.
Yeah, disgusting, isn't it?
Well, everything's fine then, yup.
Yup.
Yep.
Yup. Oh, did I mention I retire in 2 days?
Oh, really? That's...
And the battleship Maine exploding in February of 1898. This video is done by Mr. Betts.
Remember when Spain was the most dominant power in the Western Hemisphere? This was them in 1790. 100 years later, not so much. And revolutionaries in Cuba wanted to be added to the list of former colonies in 1895, but Spain was having none of it. Enter General Valeriano Weyler, the governor of Cuba, tasked with crushing the rebellion. He's perhaps best known for his reconcentration camps, but like any M. Night Shyamalan film, his came with a twist. I see dead people. He didn't detain rebels or undesirables. His camps detained the Cuban people. 1.5 million Cubans, 1/3 of the population, were at gunpoint forced to abandon their homes for these camps that, surprise, had inadequate food, inadequate supplies, inadequate housing, medical treatment, basically everything. And 400,000 Cubans died, earning Weyler the nickname The Butcher. Who gave him this name? These guys, American newspaper publishers like Joseph Pulitzer and his New York World and William Randolph Hearst and his New York Journal. And these guys hated each other just as much as they loved selling papers using yellow journalism or sensationalism and crude exaggeration. And readers couldn't get enough of the patriotic Cubans fighting against the tyrannical and sometimes tawdry Spanish. But the papers and the public weren't enough to have the U.S. intervene in the Cuban War for independence. You would need the businesses and politicians too. See, the late 1800s was all about imperialism, finding new markets and people to trade with you.
And that little trade with you part is actually the key part as we move forward. This is an era of imperialism, and this is what we had spent some time talking about last week, and that is that the idea that the United States believed that we were the we owned from sea to shining sea, that democracy was successful. We were a country that was booming. The businesses that were making money. We had the millionaires, the Gilded Age millionaires, the Carnegie and Rockefeller and Vanderbilt and J.P. Morgan. And as you can imagine, is that the idea of being able to take that business on the road was something that was actually quite enticing, including these couple nations here.
The U.S. had dabbled in this, sending Commodore Matthew Perry to go open Japan and helping Sanford Dole to rearrange the power structure in Hawaii. But why go?
So there are two nations actually that the United States had already started messing with, and one of them being Japan, famously. Japan is going to announce that they want to become more quote-unquote westernized. They had been basically an isolated country, and where they had primarily lived the same way that they had lived for hundreds and hundreds of years, the samurai, the feudal system which had existed in Japan, and they wanted to become quote-unquote more modern. So the United States was one of those countries that was invited in, and we were obviously excited because, as you can imagine, this is that if you have an entire country that doesn't have electrical lights, that don't have telephones, that don't have cars, that don't have the products that we in the West have the ability to sell, you have an entire country's full of customers that you have the ability to sell to. Same thing also with Hawaii, as you can imagine, being an island nation in the middle of the Pacific, and Hawaii basically being an island of natives that had really not been too keen on the idea of another country controlling them. The United States is going to come in and basically control them.
Go all the way over there when there's a perfectly good Civil War ravaged island in your own backyard. Many in Congress felt that if the U.S. was going to be a big boy country, it was going to have to start poking its nose in international affairs. So when the USS Maine was sent to protect the American interests in Cuba, namely sugar plantations, and mysteriously blew up on February 15th, 1898, the people were like, Big business was like. Warhawks were like. Mark Twain was like. No. And Hertz and Pulitzer were like. Hertz, you old hugamaga, did you?
So just to go with Mr. Betts, the gentleman who creates these videos, an awful lot of tongue in cheek and a really bright guy. I wish I had the budget that this guy has in order to make some of these films. But there are a lot of people who are obviously really excited about the idea of us going to war, which, as you can imagine, is like you're not supposed to be excited about going to war. But the people are obviously pumped up because the battleship Maine had exploded and 266 Americans are dead. And there are an awful lot of people that are clamoring for this war to begin, for quote unquote revenge. The title was, and actually works out to be really convenient, is that to hell with Spain, remember the Maine. And the Maine obviously being the battleship that had exploded. So convenient that they made sure that they took a battleship down there that rhymed with the country of Spain. And when the Maine does blow up and the 266 Americans are dead, as you can imagine, the American people are only going to respond to what the newspapers tell them. And the newspapers, and this happens to be Joseph Pulitzer that you see busting open the door of William Randolph Hearst, both of them newspaper publishers, both of them hate each other, but both of them are making a ton of money off this potential war that's about to kick off. So if you can get this war going, this is obviously going to sell newspapers. So these two are excited about the possibility. So as you're going to see here in just a moment, they're going to be really pumped up about the possibility of war, but you're also going to see that the people are excited. Businesses are excited because businesses, obviously war is going to mean war production. You're going to have to build ships. You're going to have to get people ready for war. Railroad companies are going to have to send soldiers to Cuba, to the Philippines, to these island nations where people are. And again, it was just going to be hooray all the way around, with the exception of course, Spain, that's going to end up losing for colonial powers.
You hear about Havana?
Went kaboom, whole ship's out of print.
You afternoonified on the why?
Why? Why's it matter? We're gonna sell a lot of gray ladies.
Sure are, you old gooby windbag.
Four flusher.
Mons watcher?
Fusty lungs.
Are we gonna do this or what? Yellow journalism was in full effect. Crisis is at hand, Spanish treachery. Yeah, what's that small font say?
Belief.
Oh.
Yeah.
So you don't really know.
Yellow journalism.
Spain.
Making it sound horrible.
Main explosion caused by bomb or torpedo. Oh my God, you know for sure? Question mark. You can print anything with a question mark. Destruction of the warship Maine was the work of the enemy. Then why are you issuing a reward for the evidence? Is it because you don't have any evidence? It's because you don't have any evidence,
Don't have any evidence.
In this headline, it's a quote by then Assistant Secretary of the Navy, Theodore Roosevelt. In case you didn't know, Theodore Roosevelt had already been a sickly child that manned his way to health, a Harvard-educated naval war historian, a cowboy rancher in the Badlands of North Dakota, the police commissioner of New York City, and at that point, the Assistant Secretary of the Navy, where he super-duper pushed for building up the fleet and protecting interests in the Pacific and Caribbean.
So again, when we're talking about not only the Spanish-American War, but we're also going to eventually look at World War I, is that the people that are involved are obviously big players into exactly what's going to happen. And Teddy Roosevelt happens to be the Assistant Secretary of the Navy. And you say, well, I'm not understanding why I have to know that. And that is that he happens to be a person who has an awful lot of pull. The Roosevelt family is a very, very big name in New York. In New York, his cousin's going to later become another president, and that's going to be Franklin Delano Roosevelt, which we've already talked about here in class. But Teddy Roosevelt grew up studying naval history, and he's now in charge of the Navy. So when one of the naval ships blows up in Havana Harbor, as you can imagine, when those are your babies and those are your ships, you're going to get really pumped up and you're going to get really angry about that. And Teddy Roosevelt was an excitable guy. This was a guy that had basically grown up as an asthmatic kid, had a really difficult time even being able to be in a classroom, had to basically spend a whole lot of time outdoors. Really, really fascinating dude from the standpoint of his everything from his marriage to his first wife. His wife and his mother are going to die on the same exact day of two very different maladies. His wife's going to die from complications from childbirth, and his mother's going to end up dying from, I don't remember what her malady is, but she also passes away on the same day. So Teddy Roosevelt, and again, childbirth is that he's going to be the father of a 2-day-old baby girl, and he's going to basically kind of lose his mind, and he's going to go out west, spend some time out west, killing large animals, spending time with cowboys and so forth, which is going to be a part of the reason why when this war kicks off, he's going to be excited about being a part of it. And that's going to be because, well, he was out west and he was rough and tumble, and shooting a gun was kind of manly, and he was kind of excited about the idea of shooting a gun. So this dude who works behind a desk in Washington, D.C. is going to quit his job, and he's going to join what is called the Rough Riders, or the 101st, or he's going to be join this voluntary cavalry unit. Rough Riders are supposed to be on horseback, and they're going to go into Cuba, and they're going to go ahead and fight against the Cubans as a lieutenant colonel. Well, as you're going to see, show me how many horses those Rough Riders actually have.
Foreshadowing.
That was until war broke out and he said, "Peace, I'm going to war," resigned and started the 1st U.S. Volunteer Cavalry Regiment, or the Rough Riders, because when you're Teddy Roosevelt, that's the kind of thing you do. Anyway, war had been declared against Spain by Congress and signed by vampire-looking President William McKinley, only the 3rd time in American history that war had been declared. And to this declaration of war, the Teller Amendment was added that said, "No, we're not trying to make Cuba a colony. No. Well, maybe."
This is actually kind of important too. The United States had actually had a policy of what was called the Monroe Doctrine. It was actually signed way back in 1826 by President Monroe. Back at a time when you think about where the country was back in 1826, is that we are only 14 years after the War of 1812, and we are basically still this infant country. We don't have much of a navy, and the United States basically declares that the United States is going to take care of the Americas, that no one is allowed to colonize or to be in the Americas. So this is also part of the reason why the United States is going to get involved into what's going on in Cuba, because you now have a European nation, Spain, which is causing trouble in one of its island neighbors, and that's going to be Cuba. So Cuba is actually a little concerned. They're concerned that if the United States comes in and they help out the Cubans, that the United States is basically going to push the Cubans aside and go, well, we pushed out the Spanish, now we're going to take over. And this is where this Teller Amendment that they're mentioning right here comes in and says, we promise that we are not joining in this thing to take over Cuba, that we are promising Cuba's independence at the end of this war that's about to take place. And it was called the Teller Amendment. And Cuba is kind of going to get their independence, kind of, in a way, as they mentioned here, maybe.
So the fighting began on the other side of the planet. The modern U.S. warships, thanks Teddy, pulverized the outdated Spanish fleet at Manila Bay in the Philippines.
I love this video, and it's absolutely 100% true of exactly what happens in this particular battle, and that is that the American ships, which were built only 3 years earlier in 1895, this is the USS Olympia, which is actually located in Philadelphia's harbor today, takes on the Spanish ships, which are made out of wood. The cannonballs of the Spanish boats are actually bouncing off the American boats, and the Spaniards are destroyed. There are only 7 American ships. There are 10 Spanish ships. All 10 Spanish ships are destroyed. Many hundreds of Spaniards are killed, and only 1 American dies, and basically because a cannonball basically takes off a guy's head, which had to have been just bad luck.
And gave America control of Spain's Pacific outpost. Back in the Western Hemisphere, over 18,000 troops and volunteers were deployed to Cuba under the leadership of General William Shafter, an elderly 300-pound-plus Civil War veteran that mainly sweated like a pig the whole war.
Now, this is actually interesting, and they don't make a big point in this particular video, but this is actually very true, too. This is going to be the very first war that's going to bring Northern soldiers and Southern soldiers since the Civil War that are going to fight together. So as you can imagine, is that there are an awful lot of people that are in the South that are a little nervous of all of these soldiers in blue uniforms that are traveling through Virginia, through the Carolinas, through Georgia, through Florida, and are all in this war that had taken place 30 years earlier, the Civil War that took place 33 years earlier. A lot of folks are like, hey, I remember the last time this happened, and that wasn't good for us. So President McKinley, that vampire bat that they basically made fun of here in the film, is going to have to hire some former Confederate leaders to actually lead a lot of the troops in Cuba, including this guy who happens to be literally a former Confederate leader who was brought in. The dude is old as dirt, and he almost dies, partially because, as you can see right here in this ad, this war is being fought in July and August, and these uniforms that they're wearing are wool. So a couple things are obviously not working in their favor. A, incredible heat in Havana Harbor. B, mosquitoes, which are biting the living daylights out of the soldiers that are down there. A lot of people are going to die of malaria. And third, the ships are rolling up close to the Cuban shore, but are not actually getting there. And a lot of sailors are trying to step off the boat and are drowning because, well, they're sailors and they don't know how to swim. So there are a lot of sailors that are going to simply drown getting off the boat. This war, if this was supposed to show how amazing the United States was and was ready to basically jump onto the world stage, we were not ready. But were we better than Spain? Yes, we were better than Spain, and a lot better than Spain.
The fighting was brief, but fierce, with the most famous at San Juan Hill, where Teddy Roosevelt and his band of Rough Riders fought tooth and nail, inch for inch, to finally take the hill and find it was already taken.
Also
Buffalo
true.
soldiers. Oh, hey, Teddy. What?
Buffalo soldiers was actually the nickname that was given to African American soldiers. They were led by a guy by the name of Jack Pershing, who is also nicknamed Black Jack Pershing. He was commanding the black troops at San Juan, and the black soldiers that actually made it to the top of the hill and actually defeated the Spanish before Teddy Roosevelt could get to the top of the hill. So historically, blacks had actually done the deed that Teddy Roosevelt was trying to gain some fame and notoriety for. And Teddy Roosevelt comes up behind them, only to find out that the black soldiers had already made it there. And in truth, the conversation they're having here kind of happened.
What are you guys doing here?
You serious? We've been here for a while now.
Uh-huh. Well, this is awkward.
Yeah. Some of your reporters have been waiting up here with us. Hope that's
True.
okay.
Reporters were there.
Sure. Hey, would you mind taking a photo of me and my men? Little keepsake.
No problem.
Notice no African Americans in the shot.
6 weeks after it started, the fighting was over. A splendid little war in which only 385 Americans died from combat.
385 men died of combat, but 266 of them had died on the main. So this entire 4-month-long war is going to result in roughly 120 soldiers, actually, technically, specifically 119 soldiers actually being killed, which if you think about that over 4 months and the number of people that are actually dying of COVID today is that this was a ridiculously splendid little war. And again, mosquitoes had killed more people, or roughly about 3,500 Americans are going to die in this war. And roughly about 3,200 of them are going to be killed by something other than Spanish bullets. Actually, everyone except for 119 of them. So either A, congratulations, 266 of them are going to die by your own boat blowing up, which is more than what the Spanish actually killed. Mosquitoes are going to kill more. Eating bad meat is going to kill more, which is actually highlighted here as well.
And another 2,000 died from disease and other causes. It's probable that more soldiers died from rotten canned meat than fighting.
This is true. The canned meat that they actually ate in the Spanish-American War was 33-year-old canned meat from the Civil War. 33-year-old meat, and people died eating it. So again, were we an amazing fighting force in 1898? By no means, no. But again, we were better than the Spanish were.
Wonder if anybody's gonna do anything about that later. And now it was time to end the war with the Treaty of Paris. Seriously, another Treaty of Paris? You guys need to pick a new place to make peace. Whoa, 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 buddy. I got this. You don't need to bother coming in here. Are you sure? Yeah, just a bunch of legal stuff. Go enjoy your independence. You earned it. I don't know. I kind of think I should be there. Why? I already passed the Teller Amendment saying we're totally not going to make you a colony. Whoa, I gotta go. Spain's getting antsy. Hey, what do you call this? Hamon? I don't know. It tastes like ham to me. It's delicious. I can't stop eating it. All right, buddy. Here's the skinny. You're free. Spain's completely pulling out. And we're gonna pull in. I got this Platt Amendment that says that I have the right to intervene in you for the preservation of Cuban independence, yada, yada, yada. That cool?
Now, again, he's right. The Teller Amendment said that we were not going to end up taking over Cuba, but we were going to create the Platt Amendment, which says that we have the ability to control what businesses and what enterprises are going to take place in Cuba. So, in other words, we now suddenly become Cuba's big brother. And so Cuba, not only do they not have control as to who sets up businesses there, which America is going to obviously, it's going to set up many businesses in Cuba, but Cuba doesn't have any power as far as being able to say yes or no as to whether other countries are allowed to bring in their own businesses. The United States kind of controls that. So it's an awful lot of big brother, little brother sort of thing. And again, some other rules.
Oh, yeah, and you can't allow foreign powers in Cuba for military purposes.
Nobody else is allowed to be there.
Except for us. We get to lease a base in you forever. But you're totally independent.
And again, what actually true is that right here on the bottom tip of Cuba, there's going to be an American naval base that's going to be built on the southern end of Cuba. Is going to be called Guantanamo Bay, which that base actually still exists today in 2021. That Guantanamo Bay, what makes it even worse is that not only do we have a military base still located in Cuba, which today Cuba is a communist country, is that at that particular military base located on the southern tip of Cuba, this is where we keep all of America's most wanted terrorists. So when we capture terrorists around the world, we take them to a prison base that's located in Cuba because, again, as you can imagine, we as Americans wouldn't want terrorists being on American soil.
Oh, and do me a favor, tell the Philippines, Guam, and Puerto Rico they're mine now too.
And that's also true. We are not going to take Cuba. The Teller Amendment says we couldn't take Cuba, but the Teller Amendment does not say anything about the Philippines, doesn't say anything about Puerto Rico, and it doesn't say anything about Guam. And we are going to take all three of them. Philippines are going to be absolutely upset about this because they were fighting for their own independence as well. And we are basically going to get into our own revolution with the Filipinos, and where we are going to end up killing thousands of Filipinos, and it's not going to make it in the American paper because it is halfway around the world, and Hearst and Pulitzer don't have enough, obviously, the money and the resources to be able to send news back from around the world. So we're basically able to, quote unquote, commit murder halfway around the world and be able to take over the Philippines. Puerto Rico, which is still a territory today, Guam, which is still a territory today. The Philippines is now independent, has been independent for some time now. But these two are basically have no federal power whatsoever because they are territories. They do not vote in federal elections. They do not vote for president. They do not have a senator. They do not have congressmen. So, yeah. So we took those.
What?
Ta-da. So again, this Mr. Best is actually really, really quite awesome. So let us go through the notes here real quick, and let's go into exactly where we left off. And that is that the Maine blowing up and the blowing up of the ship. And again, this is a sister ship that actually is located in Philadelphia. This is the Olympia. This is the ship that actually had been in Manila Bay, but it was built at exactly the same time as the USS Maine. It looks exactly the same. So this is what the Maine would have looked like. And with the explosion that had actually taken place, it actually took place at the same time on the on the bottom of the ship, and the coal fire that actually had taken place that was going to result in that ship exploding. Unfortunately, the crew members of the Maine were actually located at the top of the ship, just above the coal and above the gunpowder. So when the boat does blow up, it basically completely incinerates the 266 sailors that are going to be killed. And as you can see, what made these battleships so powerful is not only were they made entirely out of steel, but you did have these what are called turrets, which have the ability to be able to fire. Not only do they have the ability to fire right and fire left, but fire straight off the back end of the ship. And while you can't fire forward, there is a gun at the front end of the boat. So this boat pretty much can fire at a target from 360 degrees all the way around, where back in the days of the old wooden ships, you had to kind of line up on its side because all of the cannons were located on the sides of those ships. So for the Americans, all they had to do is basically head directly at the Spanish ships, and the Spanish ships couldn't shoot at them. So McKinley ends up sending the country into war. William McKinley, the 25th president of the United States, supported greatly by the Gilded Age millionaires. This guy was basically, he wasn't very popular amongst the American people, but he was very popular amongst business. And again, the idea that we were going to have these new territories, be able to set up business, this was something that was great for businesses. He was a Civil War veteran, so he wasn't all that excited about war itself. A longtime politician, had been a politician, an awful lot like Joe Biden that's coming into office, had been in Washington, D.C. for quite some time. And he really didn't like the public stage an awful lot, which as this war kind of came to a hilt, it really kind of forced him into the limelight, which he really wasn't all that comfortable with. So, but Teddy Roosevelt, the Assistant Secretary of the Navy, the reasons, what were the reasons for the Spanish-American War? Protection of American businesses' interests in Cuba, American support of Cuban rebels to gain independence from Spain, rising tensions between Spain and the United States that as a result of the sinking of the USS Maine in Havana Harbor, and lastly, the exaggerated news reports or the events of yellow journalism that obviously we're going to end up taking this thing off to another level as well. So we're going to come back to those notes in just a second. So let's go back to where I'm hoping that we were. Nope, that's not where we were. That's what's horrible whenever you have that many tabs open. Let's go to kill that tab. And let's go to Teddy Roosevelt.
A century has passed since Washington wrote, "To be prepared for war is the most effectual means of promoting the peace."
In 1897, as Assistant Secretary of the Navy, TR finds a cause that can help him redeem his family's honor. In Cuba, a long-simmering insurgency against the Spanish colonial empire is coming to a head. TR clamors for military intervention there, arguing that it's America's duty to liberate its oppressed neighbors.
It was Theodore Roosevelt that was the first one to say, we have a responsibility to go over and bring people freedom, our freedom, and mess in their affairs. And quite honestly, that's the trouble that we have now in the Middle East. That's the trouble that we have everywhere in the world, is that we were saying, we're so great, we're going to bring this to you. That was an invention of Theodore Roosevelt.
The loss of national honor.
What Teddy needs is a persuasive cause for attacking Cuba, a weapons of mass destruction argument. And he's about to get one. Remember the Maine? Probably not. Most Americans don't. But that's the U.S. warship that exploded in Havana Harbor in February 1898, taking 254 American sailors to their watery graves.
66.
Like 9/11 a century later, the tragedy roused America into vengeful fury and gave Teddy the cause for war he so desperately sought, even though it wasn't clear who was to blame.
Created tremendous war fever in the country and outrage on the part of TR, who thought this hideous act against us was needed to be dealt with immediately.
Theodore Roosevelt simply quits being Assistant Secretary of the Navy and says, I'm going to war.
TR uses every bit of his political influence to get a commission as Lieutenant Colonel in the 1st United States Volunteer Cavalry Regiment.
Come on, lads, forward! Courage! Courage!
He assembled a combination, and only Teddy Roosevelt could have done this, a combination of Ivy League graduates and cowboys that he had met in the West. And of course, they were called the Rough Riders.
Those Rough Riders were going to be, as he mentioned, people that he knew growing up in New York City. He actually went to Harvard, graduated from Harvard, and people that he actually knew back when his wife had died, that he had gone out west. So the people that were out west with him, the people that he grew up with back east. So he had lawyers and he had cowboys, and it was these Rough Riders that went into San Juan Hill in Cuba and actually had made the name for themselves. And so we go back to the notes and we talk about exactly what is going to get us into the war. The Maine blowing up and those people that had died were definitely a big part of that reason why. But Teddy Roosevelt's big mouth and his insistence that the United States get involved in helping the Cubans was really going to be a part of that. So we get into this again is at Arlington National Cemetery up on the top of Arlington. If you actually go directly off here to the left, you'll be at the Tomb of the Unknowns in Arlington National Cemetery. The main itself, the coal bunker that we're located right down here at the very bottom of the ship, which is located, as you can see, is that here's where one of the cannons is. Here's where one of the other cannons is. So there's gunpowder directly up underneath of this. There's gunpowder directly underneath of this. And the coal was right in between the two of them. So when the boat blew up, it allowed both of those to be ignited. So the war starts over in the Philippines, as mentioned in the film. Admiral Dewey is going to end up becoming basically a hero overnight, destroying the entire Spanish Navy in the Philippines. And some interesting facts, and this is something, again, we mentioned already. First war involving the United American Army since the Civil War. It was also President McKinley had to assign former Confederate leaders in charge of mostly Northern soldiers. So it was an awful lot of distrust with leadership, a lot of soldiers that weren't necessarily believing or listening to their commanders. So it was an awful lot of basically chaos on the battlefield. The brand spanking new Navy was one of the very first that was built out of steel. The Spanish ships were still constructed out of wood. So some other interesting facts. The war only lasts 4 months. And in that 4 months, it did show the need for the Panama Canal. Now, the Panama Canal is going to be built after Teddy Roosevelt's going to become president, and he's going to recognize that we needed that canal to be able to get those American ships from the Philippines way over in the Pacific to be able to travel them all the way across the Pacific Ocean and around South America to get them up to Cuba. Many of the American battleships were not able to get there in time for the war that was actually being fought in Cuba at the same time. Teddy Roosevelt becomes a national hero. He is going to quit his assistant, as they mentioned here in the film. He quits his job as the Assistant Secretary of the Navy and becomes a Rough Rider. And what's, again, is hilarious is that he gets this uniform actually created for him at Brooks Brothers. It was not a standard issue uniform. And actually, you look at some of the pictures we're going to show you later, it's that his uniform is different than everybody else's. John Hay, the Secretary of State, did call it a splendid little war. Now, again, 119 people did end up getting killed in 4 months, which, again, it sounds more dangerous than if you actually were to the statistics as far as drunk driving in the United States today, I think ends up killing more Americans. So, yeah, it was fairly safe to be in this particular war. Some of the Spanish guns were actually so ineffective that the bullets from the Spaniards had actually bounced off of American soldiers in Cuba because the gunpowder had actually gotten really humid and lost an awful lot of its pep. So just like a firework that has been around for a long time, it's like it just fizzles. A lot of the Spanish guns just fizzled, and the bullets basically just bounced off of American soldiers, thinking that in many ways that they were just that incredible. 385 soldiers died in battle. 266 of them died on the USS Maine. Roughly 2,000 others died attributed to malaria, disease, eating bad meat, which was going to be one of those things when Teddy Roosevelt is going to become the president, is going to create the Pure Food and Drug Act, which is going to basically remind people that, remember back in the war when people were eating that bad meat, and Teddy Roosevelt's going to be like, yeah, we got to fix that. And then again, people drowning. So you can see even in this picture, here happens to be Teddy Roosevelt right here. He had actually made 2 other uniforms. This happens to be Colonel Leonard Wood, the guy who actually was in charge of the entire operation down here. And as you can see, all the other soldiers that are here all wearing these blue uniforms that are here, with the exception of a few other folks that look like they either modeled theirs after Roosevelt, but were not necessarily the same. So these Rough Riders, which are all supposed to be on horseback, even the artist actually captures it pretty realistically. Roosevelt was able to get a hold of a horse. He's up on horseback, but the rest of the soldiers don't have any horses because the American Navy doesn't have the ships large enough whenever they leave Tampa, Florida to head down to Cuba to be able to hold the horses. So they have no way to get the horses down to Cuba. They trained for a horse battle. They trained on horseback. And then when they get to Florida, they have to leave the horses behind. And these Rough Riders are not riding. They're rough walking. They're rough running, but they are definitely not riding. So again, that same shot that they mentioned in the video of Roosevelt making it to the top, and it's again, boom, right dead center, right smack in the middle. There's Teddy Roosevelt making sure he gets all the glory. And the dude definitely was a glory hound. The United States does emerge as a world power. Cuba gains its independence from Spain. Again, the Platt Amendment said that they really, really didn't. But the United States is going to establish a naval base on Cuba called Guantanamo Bay. And Also, the United States is going to gain possession of the Philippines, Guam, and Puerto Rico. And the United States annexes Hawaii and makes it an American territory. So the United States is going to, in that new American territory, is going to establish a naval base there. And that one will be called Pearl Harbor, which I do have a funny feeling that here soon we're going to be talking about again. So the United States has expanded itself basically to include not only our lower 48, as you can see, Alaska had been purchased a few decades earlier, Seward's icebox, and which we purchased that in 1867. You can see the Hawaiian Islands do become a territory officially in the same year as the Spanish-American War. Midway Island, which is going to take place at the same time as Alaska, Johnston Islands, Wake Island, Guam. As you can see, we're basically looking to put ourselves on the doorstep of China, to which we are going to basically be a part of in 1900 for what is known as the Boxer Rebellion. So you can see is that the Panama Canal needs to be built because, again, when the war starts in the Philippines and we leave our Navy, basically from the Philippines to go to Cuba, is that those ships, including the Olympia, have to travel all the way around the end of South America and then come back up to Cuba, where with the Panama Canal, they can basically shoot straight through here, and that will begin construction in 1904. So when the war ends, McKinley's actually concerned he's not going to win re-election. The war ends very quickly in 1898, and as we all know as Americans, is that we have a very, very short memory. So when the year 1900 comes up and he's running for re-election, is that McKinley brings on Teddy Roosevelt as his vice president. And this is partially done because, well, if you think about what the vice president does, they really don't do anything. They break the deciding vote in the Senate. They basically do the will of the president, but basically there's somebody that's easily controlled. So McKinley ends up winning his reelection partially because Teddy Roosevelt is brought onto the ticket in 1900, and he is going to be assassinated 6 months later in Syracuse, New York, by a gentleman by the name of Leon Solgos, who literally walks right up to McKinley with a handgun wrapped up in a napkin and basically fires at point blank range. The interesting piece about McKinley's assassination is that McKinley is not going to end up dying via the gunshot. The bullet is basically lodged in his body, and there's a really good chance that he's going to survive his gunshots. But Thomas Edison's wonderful invention, the X-ray machine, comes along, and they actually can see on the X-ray where the bullet is located inside of his chest. And doctors decide that they're going to go in and they're going to see if they can get it out. Well, they end up accidentally killing the president, and the president dies. And the fun thing is that Solgos is going to actually be tried and is going to be sentenced to death and is going to be executed like 6 weeks after the assassination. So it's an incredibly short period of time, like a month and a half after he kills the president. They're going to kill this guy, and they kill him with Thomas Edison's other invention, the electric chair. Leon Solgos is going to die via the electric chair. So the new president of the United States is going to become Teddy Roosevelt. And again, he was a Rough Rider. He was a New York senator. He was McKinley's vice president for a very short period of time. And this was a guy that basically, because again, he was a guy that was always the sickly kid growing up, is that he tended to favor the little guy. He tended to favor the worker. Although he was by himself, he was a very, very rich kid growing up. He was kind of an outsider all the time. And he really, really championed the little guy and was going to be a good president. Actually, Mount Rushmore, great. One of the greatest presidents this country's ever had, and at least in my eyes, he is my favorite president of all of them. Fascinating dude. 26th president of the United States. So this is going to end our notes. You're going to please make sure that you've obviously answered all the questions. Make sure you play this video all the way till the end so you end up getting full credit. If you have any questions, by all means, send me an email. But your test has been moved to your first of all, your quiz, your Map of Europe 1914 quiz, which was next Monday, has been delayed. That's going to be pushed off a little further. We are going to have, because you have other tests to study for, you have next Wednesday, a week from tomorrow, that's going to be your test day, and that is going to be on the Spanish-American War. And well, we're going to get that lift out to you guys here in another day or so. So good luck with this. Make sure this gets turned in. Get full credit. And again, I'll be back on Thursday. Have yourselves a great day.